I'm here with Kristin, a Reed graduate, who is going to share a little bit about her experience at Reed and after Reed. Just tell us a little bit about what you do right now.
So I'm a corporate attorney based in Portland, Oregon, and I do a lot of work with mid-market businesses and funds, mostly finance work, although the nature of a more mid-market practice necessarily involves being more of a general advisor to your clients. Generally, when you're working with companies that are a little smaller, some may still be family owned or run by the founders. They will often find that you are their lawyer who they know, and they may meet you through a financial transaction, but they will then often come back to you with questions on a one-off basis or asking you to introduce them to other people. And that's where, you make that connection to someone else in the firm if they have an IP issue or a lease issue or a real estate matter. And so you really do get a sort of holistic view of the business.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, a lot of what I've done last year has obviously been related to the pandemic. I've helped a lot of businesses navigate whether it's federal or state relief programs, how those interact with their loan agreements, with their lenders, looked at some restructuring scenarios for businesses that weren't sure they were going to make it through and really wanted to make sure that they could help keep their employees employed and keep the business running for after pandemic, whatever that wound up being. And initially we thought that might be a much shorter horizon than it's turned out to be.
Yeah.
I do some pro bono work as well. Our firm has a really strong presence in Portland. We partner a lot with the ACLU. We started our own Main Street Relief project last year. So working with sort of micro businesses, restaurants, bars, helping them navigate business and financial matters.
Did I hear you say mid-market businesses?
Yes.
Tell me what that means.
So mid-market can mean a lot of things depending on who you're talking to. But
appropriately ambiguous.
I am one of many big law refugees at Stoel and at firms like Stoel, who started out in a big New York or London-based firm with the hundreds of lawyers in an office where you're doing deals that are 500 million and up, largely.
Yeah. Wow.
Which, big numbers. And largely what you're dealing with are the banks that everyone has heard of or the sponsors that everyone has heard of, sometimes for good reasons, sometimes for bad reasons. So mid-market is sort of the step down from that, where you're not generally talking about sponsor-owned portfolio companies anymore, but you're talking still about operating company representation.
Okay.
And
so significantly sized, but not one of the biggest players.
Yeah. So you're talking about people who are definitely household names. Oftentimes, I do a lot of work with Tofurky and Blue Star Donuts, like brands that people have heard of. Tofurky is a great example of like the type of client that I really wanted to work with, and part of why I came back to Portland, because it's started by some hippies who are still involved with the business. The team who are involved there, like the CFO, I just adore Andy. Like he's a really great guy who wanted to move to Hood River, Oregon so that his kids could have this, beautiful outdoors lifestyle. And, he's really passionate about developing the company and the brand and the future of plant-based proteins. And they're still, a very local business. Their operations are in Hood River. I've been out to see the factory and you can see where they're making all of the products and, they're right in the port as part of that sort of hub of development in Hood River. And it's just a gorgeous facility.
So this is the thing that I'm noticing about this conversation and about you as a lawyer in particular, is you are familiar with the company, what they do, what their passions are about their products. And, if someone's thinking about pre-law, if someone's thinking about being a lawyer, they're probably not, what I hear you talking about is a relationship.
Yeah. And I think that's something that I like about the corporate practice. You talk to a lot of litigators and they'll, they have their own thing, but it's almost like a separate industry when you're talking about taking on a lawsuit versus when you're talking about a corporate representation for a business, because what I aim to do with my clients is to be involved in that life cycle of the business. And whether that's, right now their financing partner is going to be a sort of smaller lender who they may or may not grow out of that relationship, and they may have to look for a new partner as they expand development, as they explore new opportunities. You're around for conversations sometimes where they look at whether it's going to make sense to partner with another business, whether it's going to make sense to partner with just another supplier. And that's, what I do is generally pure finance. But like I said, when you're working with companies who are in that smaller space, oftentimes they come back to you and they want to ask more questions, and you want to be there for them in between deals on an ongoing relationship basis.
Tell me where you went to high school, like where you grew, where you went to high school, and how you got from high school to Reed.
So I went to two different high schools. I started at Choate Rosemary Hall in Connecticut, which is a boarding school. And my first semester that I was there, the dorm advisor in my building, he was an English teacher. He and I were having a conversation, and we're talking about what I'd been reading and what I wanted to study and what I wanted to be focused on. And he told me that he didn't want to, get ahead of himself, but he thought I should look at Reed.
Wow.
So
You're kidding.
First time away from home, he's like,
what were you reading for him to say? What were you reading when you were 13 for people to know that Reed was the place for you?
I was really into Margaret Atwood. Really into Margaret Atwood at that age. I was a huge Shakespeare nerd. And I also really like Noel Coward. So a lot of theater, a lot of musical theater. And yeah, he was like, so you're queer, you're, very politically active, and you're really smart, but I don't necessarily think that, you would necessarily find the structure of some of the more university style atmospheres to your liking. So maybe you should look at Reed, because I know a lot of really smart people who've gone out there, and Portland's kind of, got your outdoorsy, like you should look at Reed. And that stuck in my head even after I left Choate and went back to Arizona during my junior year. For my final decision, it came down to Reed, University of Chicago, and University of Arizona. I did not know what I wanted to do in college. And so the idea of engineering management really appealed to me. Engineering management, some combination thereof.
Interesting.
And I was a huge lit nerd, but also a huge economics nerd. And I really liked the liberal arts college idea. And for me, Reed had stuck in my head as, if I was going to a liberal arts college, I was going to Reed. And if I was going to go somewhere that I was not going to get that experience, I wanted to go somewhere that either was good for economics, which would be the University of Chicago. And then the University of Arizona was a state school that offered me full tuition, stipend, everything under the sun if I wanted to go into their engineering school. But I would have had to do an engineering degree.
Right.
So when it came down to it, the flexibility that Reed offered, that I could have at the time shifted gears and done a 3-2 engineering program. If I changed my mind, I could do econ and math, I could do economics.
Yeah, you don't have to sacrifice.
Yeah, I could keep my options open and really, do some revisiting of what made sense for me in the long term.
So let me ask you this: when you got to Reed, and you said you were originally interested in econ and math, and you're not doing math right now, and maybe a little bit of econ. How do you get from your first year to applying to law school?
I mean, my first year, I did a lot of the usual core courses. I also did math and econ, and I really liked economics. I thought I was going to be an econ professor or a math professor. I really thought academics was going to be where I stuck it out. And I think it was more my sophomore, junior year, as I took more courses with economics professors who did applied work as part of what they, their research interests and what they try and teach you as far as options for what you can do, particularly Noel. she did a law and economics class, and it was really
And
fascinating.
who's Noelle again?
She was my thesis advisor.
Okay. And an economics professor at Reed.
Yeah, she's an economics professor. She was really, really good at showing the interplay between how economic theory can be applied to legal arguments and how understanding the legal system is important to understanding natural resource economics and what can be done, sort of bilaterally in those fields. So I decided I wanted to write a law and economics thesis, and I figured I might as well take the LSAT and, keep options open for what I wanted to do after I graduated. I really, really turned out liked the LSAT and found it really obnoxiously easy personally. And I think part of that was the Reed mentality, like economics, math, logic games, and the language side of things, it all sort of worked out pretty well. And I got a score that meant that I could apply to most of the schools that I was interested in going to, and figured, at the time, foolishly, that going straight through was obviously the right thing to do. And so I applied senior year to a bunch of law schools, figured out which was my absolute favorite out of the whole bunch, which was the University of Virginia, and basically made myself a really, really annoyingly well-known person to the admissions office. And I went to visit Georgetown and UVA on the same trip, and met my 1L roommate when I was at Admitted Students Day for both schools, and we signed our lease during Admitted Students Days. And we're like, yeah, we're going to go to UVA.
Have you thought about who you were at the beginning of Reed, when you first started Reed, and the way you perceived the world by the time you were done? And then you start thinking about these other experiences you have. What are 2 or 3 pivotal shifts that have affected the way that you have succeeded or moved through law school, succeeded or moved through your career, that you could refer back to based on your development at Reed?
I mean, I think the economics department at Reed is a huge part of everything that I have done professionally since, because it's the first place where I really got to dig into the details of how businesses make decisions and how causation works in a very nuanced way around small changes having a macro impact. Having that global view about every little thing you're looking at is part of how you serve your clients. And that Reed perspective of having a very liberal arts view of not just the direct impacts, but the second, third, fourth degree impacts can give you a perspective that enables you to ask clients questions that either they may not have thought of, or they may have thought of, and they're just really relieved that you know enough about their business to ask the question. The Reed and liberal arts ethos of your professors being part of a community rather than, gods, I think has a dramatic impact on how you approach both higher education and the workplace in the future. Because, Noelle, Jeff, Jerry, Albin, they're all people to me.
These Reed faculty.
My Reed faculty, Laura would have us over to her house, Laura Liebman. The fact that Reed really invests in creating those relationships with your professors as individual humans who are there to help you with your education, not to dictate it to you, I think really does create a mentality that when you take that to law school, a lot of your classmates don't have, but the professors still do and still appreciate. So I would think nothing in law school of using office hours with my professors and taking the opportunities to develop courses of study with them. A couple of my classmates and I put together an entire course with one of our professors who, it turns out, really wanted to teach a class that would do a deep dive feminism in the law, program, but she didn't know if there'd be interest, and we wound up building a class together, and it was really fun. And it wouldn't have happened if we hadn't had a bunch of students who were willing to look at professors as, peers in an academic community who know more than us, but who aren't better than us.
Did you find that to be the case at law firms, like with your first supervisor, your first boss?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I always had the sense that the people who were in higher positions had more time, but not necessarily any inherent superiority. And I think that makes you substantially less scared of the people who you're working for, which, enables you to ask questions that will actually help make sure that everything works better if you're not too afraid to look dumb in front of someone who, it's not that you're dumb, it's just that you haven't done the thing yet. The first time, everyone has the first time they do a certain type of transaction. And even now, I'll sometimes get staffed in a matter where I'm like, I don't know how to do a solar tax credit deal, but the guy I'm working with has done, 100 of them. So
Yeah.
I can do the pieces I know, and then I can go to him and ask him the questions and say, look, here's what I know, here's what I don't. Like, can you help me fill in the gaps so that I can support you and do the work that you want me to do? But I have no idea what any of these acronyms mean, and
Right.
have it be a judgment on my personal self or value to admit what I don't know.
As a boss, you love that. I mean, it's like you're chomping at the bit to be able to like download and to share the knowledge you've acquired. And here's this person that's interested, that's listening, that's willing to do something with it, and that'll change their behaviors as a result. You couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah, my biggest source of anxiety as a supervisor when I'm mentoring a junior or mid-level attorney is if they don't ask questions before they turn back a product to me. I'm generally pretty sure that they had questions, but now I'm going to have to spend 3 times as much of my time figuring out where the gaps are in what they've put on my desk, because they weren't able to point out to me, like, okay, this section, and this section, I have no idea what's going on. Can you explain to me?
So there's a group of Reed alumni in the law field that are willing to help you strengthen your craft.
Yeah, there's a Reed Legal Network steering committee, and we meet roughly monthly, every other month, and it's a bunch of Reed alumni lawyers who do various things. We meet with Amy, who works with alumni programs, and put on an event for reunions. We try and put on some events on campus. Last year, my friend Bear was arguing in front of the Oregon Supreme Court, and we put on an event for students where they could hear him sort of moot his arguments ahead of the case, which he won. So it was very cool. And it's a great network for finding people in other markets, asking questions about, does anyone know someone who does X, Y, or Z type law? Because I had a student reach out to me who wants to do something that is not in my field. And I find that a lot of Reedies are really eager to talk to students if they reach out, as long as they are clear about what they want and what they're interested in talking to you about. And it's going to be a useful exchange. But sometimes someone reaches out to me who's like, I really want to do patent law, and I don't do patent law. And in which case I can either go to my law school network or my firm or the Reed Alumni Network and say, hey, is there anyone who's a patent lawyer who'd be willing to talk to a current Reed student who's really interested in going down that road?